Hey, what is going on everyone? In this video, we'll be reviewing the new iPhone 14 Pro. So in this review, we'll be going over all the new features, then I'll give you my opinion on it, and then finally we'll get into who this phone is for. If you want to see an ASMR unboxing, click up here for that. So let's talk about new features. The first thing that Apple released is the dynamic island, or the pill cutout that you see on the screen. Apple moved away from the notch and has now added a more playful UI to go along with the cutout. Do I think this was a good decision? Well, I'll get into that a little bit later. Next is the always-on display. Apple added their own implementation of the always-on display, which is different than you may have seen on Android phones. Apple also added a super high resolution 48 megapixel camera and kept it in a phone design that is already quite familiar since the iPhone 12 Pro. Speaking of which, the design hasn't changed at all. So for those of you with an iPhone 13 Pro, this will feel exactly the same. Alright, so those are the new features that I'll be talking about in this video. Apple did introduce other features like emergency calling with satellite, but you can watch other reviews for that. So now let's take a closer look at the phone and talk about my experiences with it. We'll look at the design, the always-on display, the 48 megapixel camera, and the dynamic island. So I'm switching from an iPhone 12 Pro, so the design is already familiar. The only two differences you'll notice right away is the pill cutout on the front and the much bigger cameras on the back. It still looks and feels just like an iPhone. It's super high quality, and I enjoy the premium material used on the Pro models. And that's really it. If you're looking for drastic changes, then maybe wait until next year's model. Next up is the always-on display, which works by lowering the refresh rate of the screen down to 1 Hz or once every second to save on battery life. Now I know that my Android friends, they're gonna say they've already had this feature. However, this is the first time Apple is releasing it for their phones, and I have to say it's a bit confusing at first. Apple implemented a nice fade transition when the screen locks. However, I find myself glancing at the phone often thinking that I haven't turned it off, and that can get a little bit annoying. After a few days, you do get used to it. However, it would have been nice if Apple could just turn off all the pixels except for the date, time, and new notification items like we see on some Android phones. So another thing I noticed about this, and this may be a little more related to iOS 16, is the way notifications are quite useless on the lock screen. You can see here that if you receive a notification, in order to scroll, you have to first wake the screen by tapping it, then you can scroll to view. As notifications appear, you only really see the first 3 notifications and the rest get stacked underneath. It's quite easy to miss notifications after unlocking the screen since they'll disappear afterwards. I haven't really found much value in it, and it does take a toll on battery life, so I may disable this feature in the future. Next up is the 48 megapixel camera. I've taken several photos with this camera and you'll see them here, and I have to say they look great. And if you're looking to upgrade your camera and possibly use it as a daily carry, then this is it. Photos and videos look good, and here are sample photos and videos I took using the 48 megapixel camera. Apple also added a 2x zoom feature, which essentially crops the 48 megapixel image. I have to say, I am quite impressed by its quality and will post how I feel about it over time. Finally, let's take a look at the dynamic island. This is probably the most notable feature of the phone, and this is the pill-shaped cutout you see in the front. So let's see how animations make the iPhone feel. So first up is unlocking the phone. You'll see a nice little animation play there. And if you play music and go to the home screen or switch apps, you'll notice the animation play there showing you some album artwork and the waveform. You get a similar animation when you make a phone call, which is nice to look at. And of course with Pay ID, you'll notice the Face ID animation play. So all in all, it is actually quite nice, and I like how Apple implemented iOS animations around the pill cutout, but I don't really know how useful it is since I typically take phone calls and play music and anything really that the widgets do using my AirPods, and I control the phone using Siri, especially when I'm walking outside. I do want to mention that fingerprints can become an issue if you find yourself pressing the widgets often, so you may find yourself wiping the screen often to avoid smudged photos. Now, do I think that Apple made the right design decision here? Well, although it looks cool, you have to reach all the way to the top of the phone to access it. And if we remember correctly, Apple implemented a feature called reachability to help you with just that. You simply swipe down on the home bar here at the bottom and it helps you reach all the menu options. But now with the pill at the top, you have to move your hand all the way to the top of the screen to access these widgets. And I'm not the only one that thinks this may have been a poor design decision long term. Designer Tom over on TikTok has a few things to say about this as well, and I left a link to his opinion down below. So all in all, that's the dynamic island. It plays fun animations, and we'll see how we end up liking this over time. Now, over the past couple of days, I found myself using this feature less and less, and it's really only useful for the iPhone music app for me, since YouTube supports picture-in-picture mode, and I don't really ever use the dynamic island all that much. The phone does look slightly more streamlined without the notch, but that's really it. The one thing I have been enjoying on this phone are the photos. The photos are crisp and I don't require much editing thanks to that 48 megapixel sensor. But I was using iOS 16 on my iPhone 12 Pro and I didn't notice much of a difference otherwise. The speed improvements are marginal and not something those with the recent version of an iPhone will notice too much. Now let's talk about who is this iPhone for. Well, if you need a better camera and want the pill cutout on the screen, then I would say this phone is for you. I'm coming from the iPhone 12 Pro and I think the camera upgrade is worth it. However, if none of this matters to you, then I would say it's safe to wait till next year's model or upgrade to an iPhone 13 Pro, maybe. That's probably gonna go on sale soon. What I would like to say is that this feels a bit like what Apple used to do in the past when they released an S upgrade, and there's really nothing groundbreaking about it. I did do a comparison with an iPhone 10 and an iPhone 12 this past weekend, and I did notice a significant improvement in the cameras and the build quality of the phone compared to the iPhone 10. So if that matters to you, then I would definitely upgrade. When it comes to the iPhone 12, the cameras are a huge upgrade, but that's really about it. But again, this is my opinion and I upgraded mostly because of the camera improvements. Let me know down below if you're gonna upgrade to the iPhone 14 or if you're just gonna skip this version. So anyway, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. Again, my name is Tejada, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.